Right before the craziness that was 2020, my girlfriend and I went on a road trip around Indiana with plans on sightseeing in a state park and a few other local attractions. Bridget and I have been on a long trip together, and it's become one of our favorite things to do, to be able to just go across the state or even the country to see places that we've never been before. We plan on visiting at least all the states once, and we are about a third of the way through there so far. Anyways, this would be our first time actually spending time in Indiana instead of just passing through. After looking at our options, we opted to check out the Rocky Hollow Falls Canyon in Turkey Run State Park. We went in October, and while I haven't seen it in the summer, that place was meant for autumn. I would still recommend it, despite our experience. Entering the canyons, it looked like something straight out of something like The Hobbit. The small trail along the creek was therapeutic to walk through while listening to the water flow. The mossy rocks looked straight out of a painting. It was quite a serene and peaceful day. We found a small secluded spot lined with boulders and decided to stop there for a break and eat while sitting and chatting. I started hearing what sounded like someone walking above us. There were different levels at different areas of the park, so it was normal to hear or see people walking along the rocks above you or below you towards the creek. It was one of those moments that I made a note of, but that was it. Our conversation slowed down so we could finish our lunch, which gave me a chance to focus on the sounds around us. Again, this time, I could hear the sounds of footsteps approaching us. When I didn't see someone in front of us, I turned around to see who was coming. But again, I did not see anyone this time. Didn't sound like it was coming from the trail above us, but I checked anyway. There was no one there either. Bridget was looking around too, and looked at me like, where is this coming from? I just shrugged, thinking that I just wasn't seeing them, or something explainable. We were just about finished when I scanned the area, and finally saw something that looked out of place. There was a large boulder, probably 15 or 20 feet away from us, and I could clearly see someone with short hair peeking out from behind it, staring at us. I thought it was weird because with the size of the boulder, they had to be crouching or maybe on their knees to be hidden behind it. I pointed him out to Bridget too, and she definitely thought it was weird as well. We tried to ignore it, but as we both glanced over, we saw them still staring at us. Bridget said that she was feeling weirded out by it, so we decided to finish the last of our sandwiches. As we walked, we got past that area and beyond a small waterfall of sorts. Again, we paused to take more photos. While Bridget was trying to get closer to the water, I was looking around at the area again. I was starting to get the feeling like we were being watched. I usually ignore those feelings, as I was used to us being stared at, but due to the person behind the boulder earlier, I felt the need to find out exactly who was watching us. As expected, I saw what looked like the same short-haired person that I had seen earlier, now trying to hide behind a tree. I pointed them out to Bridget again, and her expression quickly changed. She was worried that they may be following us since we had been secluded for some time. I shared the sentiment that if they were following us, maybe they were going to try and rob us or who knows what. We both agreed to again move on and maybe get back around some other people so that we were not alone. We made our way to the upper part of the rocks, and since we had not seen the person in a while, we stopped again to take in the sights. This time I started digging through my backpack, looking for something, when Bridget nudged me. When I looked at her, she nodded to yet another boulder where our same stalker was hiding. At this point, I was pretty fed up. I still did not know their intentions, but so far, they've just been giving us the creeps, and I did not want our trip ruined. While I was enjoying it too, I know that these meant a lot to Bridget. Bridget was actually a foster kid, and within the homes that she lived in, they never went on any kind of trips or vacations, so anytime that we do anything out of our norm, she gets extremely excited about it and wants to do all that she can. I mean, who can blame her? So this time, since the person was not taking any action, I decided that I would, hopefully scaring them off and to let them know that they chose the wrong targets. I instead grabbed the hunting knife that I had in my bag and told Bridget to stay where she was. She was hesitant to let me go at first, but I assured her that I would be fine. I started to slowly approach the boulder. The person still looking over it now, watching me approach. When I was about 4 feet away in front of the boulder, I loudly, and as intimidatingly as I could, said, "What the hell are you doing, bro?" And they quickly dropped behind the boulder. I slowly made my way around it and was shocked by what I saw. At first I thought the guy just had really short hair, like a buzz cut, but no, this guy was completely bald. However, they had so many cuts and scratches across their head that were covered in scabs that from a distance, it truly looked like hair. That's how many cuts and scrapes he had. It looked pretty painful and unsettling as it is, but to add to it, this guy appeared gaunt, with skin that looked bluish grey and leathery. I thought that he just looked lighter from a distance because of lighting or something, but no, he was absolutely sickly looking, and the color was completely unnatural. He was crouched, and when I reached the boulder, I was on his left. The way that he was crouched, I could clearly see his spine and even his hips. I was also able to see this so well because he was completely naked. Taking this all in, I paused where I was. This was not what I was expecting to see, but before I could process much more, the guy quickly snapped his head to the left to look at me and let out a wholly unhuman hiss. It made me jump back a few steps, and I guess that he took that as an opportunity because he immediately pounced on me, knocking me to the ground with him now on top of me. I could see his bloodshot eyes and the dark sunken sockets around them. His cheekbones were also very visible and sunken in. He looked terrifying and severely sick and malnourished. Bridget was now screaming, and I was just trying to get him off me, but I was also still holding the knife. I went in to swing my right arm, my right hand being the one holding the knife, but this guy's reflexes were insane. He locked onto my arm, and he bit into the arm, causing me to drop the knife. I shouted a few expletives, and Bridget managed to throw a rock at us. This must have startled him, as he jumped, hissing at Bridget. As she continued shouting and screaming to get off of me, he actually listened and took off on all fours. He ran so quickly that it almost seemed natural for him. Once he was finally out of view, Bridget ran over to me as I got up and immediately checked my arm. He'd bitten hard enough to draw blood. Of course, now I'm worried about what that guy might have had and possibly spread to me. I immediately poured water and sanitizer onto it, and we quickly tried to make our way to someone who could help. We ended up at a shortcut back to the entrance and found someone of authority to let them know what had happened. The guy that took my information had a suspicious look the entire time that we explained it to him. At first, I thought he probably just didn't believe me. However, he said that this actually was not the first time that they've had a report of a naked man or naked men roaming around the area, but they had yet to actually find anyone. I don't know if it made me feel better or worse that we weren't alone in what we saw. After providing him with any information that we had, we left, making a beeline to the nearest hospital to get checked out. Thankfully, all the tests came back negative, and even after more tests at home, I was fine. I got a few shots just in case, but the fear that I may have been infected with something was pretty damn terrifying. The rest of the trip was fine, with no other weird people watching or attacking us, but it's something that I am never going to forget. I have been an avid hiker and camper for most of my adult life. I'm into all the outdoorsy stuff, but for the life of me, there is one thing that I experienced back in the late 90s that I cannot shake out of my mind. This was back whenever I was in my mid-20s, so I was pretty mentally and physically fit. No hallucinations, and nothing that would have caused me to imagine things. I've tried to rationalize all of this, and for some reason, I just can't seem to get through it in my head. I believe that this would have been in 1999 specifically, because I recall that there was a lot of build-up and talks about Y2K. People were saying the satellites were going to fall out of the skies, and that the government was going to take over the banking system or something stupid. I don't remember it all, and I didn't really care because I knew that it was all a joke and that none of that would happen. Unfortunately, my friend group at the time was a bit weird, and they were all panicking and prepping and whatnot. I decided that I want to get away for a while, so I figured, why not get away from everything and everyone and do whatever I wanted out in nature. When I wanted to get away, I used to spend a lot of time hiking in a specific national park that was up in Maine because I loved all of the secluded and complex trails that existed. There were some pretty gorgeous views off of the cliffs and the large bodies of water, so I knew that if I just spent a couple of days out there, I would feel so much better. The first day was just as beautiful as I had expected. It started early, so I got to wake up to the sun coming up over the cliffs. I got to watch the dew slowly raise off the ground and feel that cool but humid wind blow across my skin. I'm not going to lie, those memories are serene. When I did my hikes, I absorbed the energy that the national park emitted. Yeah, I'm that kind of person. On the second day, I just wanted to push myself a bit more. I decided that I was going to take a specific trail, the Sargent Mountain Loop. It's not really a popular trail, or at least wasn't. I have no idea if it is now. I got all of my stuff together, filled up my bottles, and headed out early in the morning. The start of the trail was exactly as I had anticipated. Mostly wooded areas that opened up to rocky formations and streams crossing here and there. It honestly was a nature trail at its best. About 30-ish minutes into the hike, things started to get weird. The first thing I noticed was the trail markers. I've done enough trail hikes to recognize a trail marker and to know that they're usually small things like paint on trees. Some of the markers though were really strange, almost like runic symbols. I don't know jack about runes or whatever, but I know that they usually have weird lines that go in all directions or whatever. That's what these were. They weren't just normal markings, they were drawn symbols. I thought that maybe it was just someone messing around, or a vandal or something like that. So I pressed on, and just pretended that they weren't there. But then the atmosphere felt like it changed. The air got thick, almost like walking through molasses. Each step started to become a chore, probably what it would feel like if I went to go do the trail nowadays. But back then I was a fit young man, and I knew that I could do the hike. Yet for some reason, I was feeling like I was struggling to even take a single step. On top of that, I was starting to feel like I was getting hit with anxiety and was hyper-focusing on the silence that was surrounding me. At this point, I decided that I needed to take a pause and catch my breath. Something was not right. That silence honestly felt rather unnatural, and as I took notice, I started feeling this weird sensation of being watched. The hair on my arms started to bump up, and I was feeling the chills on the back of my neck. It wasn't just being watched, it was like I was being watched from every direction. Like, no matter where I turned, I felt like there were eyes behind me. The rational part of my brain kept trying to tell me that it was just nerves, but that primal part that had survival as its only goal was saying that there was something dangerous going on. I immediately got up and decided that I needed to go ahead and wrap this hike up. I started to walk as fast as I could physically push myself back the way I came, down the clearly marked path until there was no path. I was walking, and as I kept down the trail, I hit what was basically a dead end, which made no sense. There was no trail continuing in front of me. It was just trees. No markings, no clearings, no diverging path. It was as if someone had been playing a Sims game and had just erased the path right there. Admittedly, I started panicking at this point. My heart rate skyrocketed, and I felt the sweat starting to bead up on my forehead in spite of the cool air, and all the while, that sense of being watched was feeling like it was getting worse. I tried to retrace my steps back the way I had come, from the way that still had the trail, but every turn I took seemed like it was just part of this really strange and broken trail maze. Each one made me feel more disoriented than the last. This is where things hit their worst. As I was breathing heavily, panicking, feeling like the world was spinning around me, I swear, I started to hear voices. It was like multiple people talking in unison, and it seemed to be coming from wherever I was being watched from. If I had to give it a better description, it was like a siren's call. It was beckoning me towards the trees deeper into those woods. I knew that I needed to get the hell away from the spot, but I had no idea where I was. I had no idea where it was coming from, and I felt like I was getting sick. I just picked a direction and took off, assuming that I was going the right way. After a few minutes of running at a full sprint, I collapsed. I remember running. I remember my legs feeling numb, and my face feeling like it was vibrating, and my vision pinpointing. I had this thought that I was going to pass out, and then the ground came up to meet my face, and I was out. I woke up, probably only a few moments later, and to my surprise, I was just off to the side of the trail that I had been looking for. The markers were back to normal, and they were all clearly visible. I pushed myself up and looked around, thinking how the hell did I get back here? but there I was. I sat there for a few moments, taking a few drinks of water and catching my breath. When I thought it was okay, I headed back to where the trail started. There was literally nothing wrong with the entire hike back to the beginning. I used to be a park ranger for the lovely Shenandoah National Park out in Virginia back in the late 80s. It was a much simpler time for sure. A bit more difficult for communications. Nobody was carrying a mini computer in their front pockets yet, that is for sure. Simplicity of the past, however, was able to harbor some deep and dark secrets. It's sometimes more so than how things are now, obviously. Shenandoah is not Yellowstone. It's probably not even known by most people out there. It is nowhere near as vast as the Rockies, but there is still plenty of wilderness out there to lose yourself in sometimes. More literally than you would ever wish for. It was starting to turn to fall, and the leaves were beginning to shift over to those patchworks of reds and oranges and yellows, but there was still that hint of green. There was still a few days left of that in between weather, where it can still get fairly warm in the days, but also pretty cool at night. As such, we were not dealing with a lot of campers or tourists that wanted to get out into the park, but there were still a few stragglers that wanted to squeeze in that super late vacation before the school year got into full swing. That is actually how all of this started. I had done my rounds on the grounds, and everything seemed pretty normal. There wasn't really a whole lot to report then. Late that Saturday afternoon, I got a call over the radio. One of the families needed assistance locating someone. At first, the details were sketchy, but I quickly learned that it was a family with a mom and a dad, a 9-year-old son, and a 13-year-old daughter. The 13-year-old daughter, Ellie, was missing. When I got that detail, I started to feel a bit ill. I have a pretty strong resolve, but a 13-year-old girl missing in the woods is not something that you want to hear because the worst case scenarios will always play on your mind. First, I drove up and talked to the family about what was going on. I was informed that Ellie and her brother were bickering a lot. Typical sibling stuff. And she told her mom that she was going to take a walk because she did not want to spend any more time around her brother. Her mom agreed and told her to stay close, but she had not come back. Since then, it had been about 3 hours and her parents were starting to get frantic. The sun was already setting and time was not on our side. I radioed back to the station and we got a search team put together pronto. Search and rescue at Shenandoah was pretty tight-knit. We knew what we were doing, but something about the evening was feeling off. Not like we were scared that we wouldn't find her, but more like the air had a bit of an extra chill to it, or I was a bit more sensitive to the cool breeze. Thankfully, if anything, it was just going to be light jacket weather, and the odds of Ellie succumbing to the elements was rather low. There was obviously other things to worry about, mostly wildlife, but I was keeping those thoughts out of my mind, hoping that the 13-year-old girl had just gotten a bit lost and that we would find her rather quickly. We searched the rest of that afternoon for several hours into the night. We were searching, calling out for Ellie, looking for any sign of this girl. Our search unit was split into 4 groups, each with 2 people, and were covering decent ground. While it had been a few hours since anyone had seen her, we didn't feel like a 13-year-old girl would cover that much distance, and being young, she was likely to get tired and stop at some point. We got several hours into the search, and the darkness started to hit me with that sense of dread that comes with being out in those woods late at night. Even as it got late into the night, my partner Pat and I were not willing to slow down. I was ready to go for the entire night, trying to find this girl. We did pause for a moment to take a quick break and get some water and eat the food that we brought along with us and to recoup some energy, but then we would be right back out there. As we paused and ate, we were both silent, just thinking and listening to the night sounds and seeing if we could hear Ellie at all. I did hear something, but it was not Ellie. It was, however, unsettling. As I sat there and ate my granola bar, I started hearing what sounded like a soft humming. I paused my chewing and just listened for a moment. The humming sounded calming, like a child's lullaby. I glanced over at Pat, and his eyes were on me and wide, like, "You hear that too?" We quickly packed up and started heading toward where we thought it was coming from, continuing to call out for Ellie, but keeping quiet for the most part to see if we could decipher exactly where it was. As we kept on, we ended up coming out to a clearing in the trees that was brightly lit by the moonlight. The humming stopped the minute that we hit the clearing, but the silence that replaced it was almost stifling. The air got colder, and I swear, I could see our breaths in the moonlight. We did not hear anything. There was nothing to cause us to be alarmed, but something was incredibly off. I swear, this small area was so still and silent that I could feel the earth rotating underneath my feet, and Pat made a comment about radioing back to the team to see if there had been any progress on the other side. I grabbed the radio and asked for a status update from the other teams, but nothing came back. It was completely silent, no matter how many times I hit the button saying, "This is Blue Team, can we get an update?" There was never a response. Once, I asked Pat if we should head back to meet with the rest of the crew and figure out what we should do to expand the search. He immediately agreed. I think that he was freaking out about the feeling that this part of the woods was giving off. I was too. I was just better at hiding it. We started making our way back. About 20 minutes back towards the campground, a voice came over the radio saying, "Blue Team, please respond." I grabbed the radio immediately and responded, telling them that we were here and that we had not had any luck and were heading back towards the camp. The voice on the other end sounded a bit confused, asking us where we were. I told them our approximate location out from the camp. Then they asked us why we had not been responding. I was confused now, saying that we had been trying to get a hold of everyone else and that they were not responding. Then the voice mentioned that they'd been trying to reach us for an hour to no success, that Ellie had been located and that they were preparing to send a team out to find us. When we got back to the camp, I talked to the other teams about what had happened. They told us that about an hour prior to us getting back a hold of them, Ellie had been located about 3 miles in the opposite direction. She was shaken, but otherwise okay. She was asked what had happened, and she mentioned that she was out for a walk in the woods and that she had actually gone in the direction that me and Pat went. She decided to go back to the camp, but for whatever reason, she could not seem to find her way back. She had a compass, and she'd been walking in a straight line in the woods, but when she turned around to go back, it seemed like the compass was pointing in the wrong direction. She walked for a long time until she realized that she was super lost. What is strange is that Pat and I went straight north. If she had gone that same direction and somehow turned around, she should have been straight south, but she was found 3 miles to the northwest, which made literally no sense. Even stranger, she mentioned that she heard the humming in the woods too, and that was what made her scared. So that's when she turned around. She didn't mention ever getting to the clearing though, just the humming. Obviously, we were glad that she was found. Confused by the humming and the fact that they could not reach us for quite a while, and a bit chilled over what we had experienced out there, but I guess it was all into a night's work. Pat and I actually went back out to that area about 2 weeks later when there weren't any campers out, and we walked in the same direction that we had for about the same amount of time. We could not for the life of us find that clearing again. We were certain that we should have entered it at some point, but it was just not there. It was super weird, and I have no idea what that forest is hiding or what was going on that night, but it was apparently temporary. Obviously, this was going on 40 years ago, so I no longer work there. I am retired, but this was one of the weirdest nights that I had experienced. I live next to one of those national parks in New South Wales. Living this close to nature means you get to deal with the wildlife and some of the weird local characters. Bushfires, floods, that sort of thing too. And idiots who think that they can just head off into the bush without bringing supplies, who really manage to stumble in. You also get the things that people don't really talk about. I haven't heard any Aboriginal legends about the land around here. However, they are supposed to be some sacred sites, and they are pretty secretive about it, given everything that I understand. Anyways, I was out on the veranda having a beer in the late afternoon. It was dusk, the sun was still up, and I'm pretty sure that was in the summer. Before you ask, no, the beer was not a Foster's. No one in Australia drinks that. I think it was a VB or a Two's. I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the tree line. They weren't moving. As I said, sometimes bushwalkers would go into the bush and get lost. Normally, they would hurry toward any building they saw to try to get to safety. I waved at them, expecting them to either wave back or screw off. It just stood there, staring at me. Thought it was one of my mates, being a cheeky prick, and started to walk over there with my beer in hand. I didn't see anyone over there though. I called out a couple of times, just to be sure. I hadn't really had that much to drink, so it was not that. I walked back to the veranda, and my blue cattle dog named Red was barking. His job is to bark if people come close, or if there is a snake nearby or something. I asked him what was wrong, and he kept at it. Eventually, I just told him to shut up. I'd had some things to do, so I was not watching the tree line like before, and I nearly missed it. When I looked again, I saw this time that the shadow figure was back, and this time it was joined by 3 others. They didn't really move. They watched me, and since it was darker now, I didn't feel safe going over there alone. I went to my house and looked up any reports of people being around here, or who were lost. There was nothing. I did not want to be inside. Red kept going to the doors and windows and barking. I don't believe in ghosts or any of that spooky BS. I kept the outside lights on all night, and whenever I looked out the window, there was no one there. I freaking hated it. I could not sleep in my bed that night, so I stayed in front of the TV to distract myself. There were some crappy ads sometimes during the early morning that woke me up. I got up to get a drink and realized that it was dawn. The sky was pink, and it already looked like it was going to be a killer storm rolling in. I could not help but check the tree line, and I saw them again. I called a mate to come to stay with me. I did not want to be seen as a little wimp, so I did not tell him why I wanted him to come. He drove out, and we sat with our VBs on the veranda, watching the storm. He was telling me about some Sheila that he was seeing, and I finally told him what happened. He took a mouthful and told me that I must have annoyed the spirits somehow, and that they were telling me to behave myself. I don't know what I could have done. I thought at first that he was pulling my leg, but he did not laugh or joke. He stayed the night on the couch, since he was freaking plastered, and it would not be safe for him to drive through the storm. I woke up with a massive hangover and went to grab a cup of coffee when I saw that there was a bloody sheep's head on the veranda. What the hell? I screamed for my mate to come and look. I don't have any sheep where I am, but one of my neighbors did, and I would guess that they were his. It almost looked like the heads had been torn off. I don't want to get into trouble with my neighbor or the cops, so we buried them and pretended not to know why it happened. The shadow people in the bush did not appear anymore after that. I didn't know if that made them happy, or if that was their way of warning me. It's really messed up. I don't know what I did to make them angry with me to begin with. Got an OC from an old park ranger that my family knows. Guy does a lot of backwoods rescue stuff too. He told us that the most messed up stories are the instances of people taking their own life, but those are other stories. After some beers, we asked him what is the most creeped out he has ever been. In Upper New York, doing some midwinter patrols around the lakes. Lots of cabins at waterfront, so the easiest way to do the rounds is to drive a snowmobile on the lake. Would just stay at ranger cabins along the way, so he would be out for days at a time. Driving along the lake, cold as all hell. See something out of the corner of his eye. Bunch of red on the ice. Drive over and see a pool of frozen blood near the edge of the lake. Blood goes over to the edge of the lake, towards a cliff face. Says it was at nearly 100 feet straight up, nearly flat surface. Extra what the hell. Drive his snowmobile to where the cliff winds down. Parks up, grabs his rifle, starts hiking up. Takes a few minutes of hiking till he gets close to where the blood trail reached the cliff edge. Finds a deer absolutely ripped to shreds. Eviscerated, guts out, flesh chewed up, almost none of it left. Not at all like how most predators do it. No way a bear could climb that cliff and do all that. Cougar isn't strong enough to carry a whole deer this far up a flat snowy surface. Sees a bunch of prints on the ground, but could not recognize them at all. Touches the corpse, realizes it is still a bit warm. This happened recently. Says that he froze on the spot, and the realization hit that the animal has not been dead for very long at all. Whatever killed/ate this thing is still nearby, and was likely hiding nearby after hearing his snowmobile. Says he took his rifle off of his back and carefully made his way back down to his snowmobile. Whole time, He said he felt like something was watching him, and he kept glancing around, expecting something to blindside him. Gets on his mobile, drives the hell away. Says that he still has no clue what could have possibly done all of that.